We love our partners, Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't jumped on their app, make sure you do. Download the app on the Google Play Store, App Store, anywhere you get your apps, or you can go to the website, underdogfantasy.com, deposit $100. They'll match 100%, up to 100%, and use the promo code FFF. From this podcast, we love drafting on there. The Superflex best ball drafts are hot right now. When the Best Ball Mania comes out, we'll be doing live drafts here. But of course, we want you to get in on the action with the fantasy football fanalists. Use the promo code FFF, and our partners, Underdog Fantasy, will match that $100 deposit up to 100%. So go ahead, make some pick'ems, go draft some best ball. We'll see you in the best ball streets.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalists Podcast, powered by Underdog Fantasy and presented by Fantasy Data, home to some of the industry's most accurate rankings.
Welcome in, everybody. Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast presented by Fantasy Data and powered by Underdog. We are joined tonight by Dom the man, and we are excited to have him back, a regular guest of the show. Also, one of our friends over here at Fantasy Data. Dom, how you doing tonight, dude?
Good. Lot to go over. I mean, I don't know where the show's going to take us, but the last, 5 days have been just an overflow of news, so I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, I did a post today saying that I couldn't have written a better story myself that the NFL here has put on. We have Calvin Ridley this week gets suspended for a $1,500 bet that he made during last season. I think that has to be one of the worst bets in NFL history. You put $1,500 on the line, lose $8 million. Then from there, we have Aaron Rodgers, who re-signs. Thank you for the people who are watching out for my typos there on Twitter. Resigns, does not resign. And he does that with Green Bay. We have Russell Wilson, who gets traded to the Denver Broncos, who I said earlier this week, he arguably leaves the toughest division in football and now joins the new arguably toughest division of football. And then we have Deshaun Watson news and, of course, the Khalil Mack news. So it just seems like one thing after another. We just keep getting more and more news. We probably going to something live here on the air. It's that crazy this week, right? So we want to jump in. We want to talk about instant reactions. What does it mean for ADP? Because there's a lot of moving pieces, and I have yet to update those ADPs yet on Fantasy Pros. But we're going to be doing them live on the show as we talk. We're going to be moving players around, discussing risers, discussing fallers, and what it means for draft season and for your fantasy football teams.
All right. Well, we'll start off with the most recent news. Deshaun Watson found not guilty by the grand jury. And reports have now come out from Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, that teams are very interested, but it seems as though Deshaun Watson is going to slow play at least over the next couple days of who will be the best suitor for him to move on from the Houston Texans. Right now, Deshaun Watson is being drafted an Underdog as the QB 16 in the best ball superflex draft behind Trevor Lawrence, behind Kirk Cousins, and behind Justin Fields. I haven't adjusted my rankings, but I think he falls into the Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray range now. I think maybe a slight discount after those players because of a pending suspension. I think you have to discount slightly, but he is coming off of a season in 2020. Like, he sat out all of 2021. The last time we saw him, 16 games, 4,800 passing yards, 33 touchdowns. He's QB5 in fantasy points. So this is a player who's still in his prime, and he's going to be able to pick and choose where he goes, and it's going to be a better organization than the Houston Texans. Dom, where do you think Deshaun Watson ends up?
Everything that I've seen throughout the day and week, I mean, it's mainly surfaced today, but it looks like the Seattle Seahawks which obviously Watson has to have interest in going there as well. But I think it was Daniel Jeremiah threw on his podcast that it's been getting bounced around the league that Watson intends on going to Seattle, or at least that's the lean that everybody has. It'd be fun to see. Obviously, we've seen the Pittsburgh Steelers get thrown in there. It really just depends on Watson's preference. Obviously, he has that no trade clause. So at the end of the day, it's his call. So I would assume he's going to walk into a good fit. But even if, for whatever reason, say he stays, I mean, he's still going to be pushed up into that range, regardless of where he picks. He's just that talented.
Yeah, it makes sense from a cap standpoint, from a pick standpoint. They can utilize all the picks they just spent on getting rid of Russell Wilson, I should say. A couple other names you hear being thrown out there right now are, of course, the Panthers, as well as the Steelers. But I would think that teams are going to be a little bit more hesitant trading to another AFC team, which makes me believe the Steelers would probably be the bottom of this list. There's a lot of scuttle saying that he's not going to want to go to Seattle because the coaching staff or whatever it may be, but it just makes so much sense from a cap standpoint and from what the team has done in terms of moves. But I could really see the Panthers as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. It's going to break down to, of course, number one, his trade clause, and where he wants to go as well. But it's going to definitely have a ripple effect across ADP, wherever he lands.
I was reading a report recently that the Steelers were not very interested in Deshaun Watson. And I think that that's not the direction that they want to go with anyways. They're probably going to look at like the Jimmy Garoppolo still of the world. And we'll talk about Jimmy in just a second in relation to a backup quarterback signed in San Francisco. But the quarterback market is starting to thin up a little bit more now that we've seen some of the shuffling. Dom, you wanted to add something more?
Yeah, with the whole Steeler thing, Billy brought up a really good point. Like AFC to AFC, the Steelers would have to blow them away with the trade. And we have to remember the Houston Texans have to accept the trade before Watson can go ahead and say, yeah, I want to go there. So if it is an AFC team, I mean, it would have to be a fantastic offer for them to say, all right, go over to Pittsburgh. I mean, you would imagine Seattle has the firepower to do so. Why would they pick Pittsburgh over Seattle? It just comes down to, I mean, there's a lot of variables that it comes down to. It's not going to be something that happens here in the next 24 hours, I wouldn't imagine. They're going to kind of play it out a little bit, see what they can get, but it'll be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, that was like one of the deciding factors with Wilson going to Denver rather than Washington was because AFC versus NFC, right? They don't want to have to face him in games and have to worry about it during conference championships or whatever it may be down the road. So I definitely think that it's going to be a deciding factor when a team is making an offer, and it's going to have to, like you said, it's going to have to really blow them away if they're going to accept that deal or not accept it if they are choosing to trade him interconference or interdivision.
Now, to put a bow on this Deshaun Watson news and bring it back to Underdog, I think that he's going to be one of the biggest risers over the next 3 days.
Already happening.
Yeah, and I've seen him go in the second round. I've seen him go in the third round now. His ADP is the end of the third round. But, with that type of talent, we could see Deshaun Watson creeping in even to the back of the first round, I think. Billy, would you have Joe Burrow or Deshaun Watson at this point?
I'm still going to go Burrow because, and there's a couple of reasons. One is Burrow has showed great chemistry with his receivers at this point. They have already had statistically some great numbers. Watson hasn't played football in over a year. People forget that, right? So he's coming in, 12 full months removed from football plus time now. He's going to be with a new coach, a new system. There's going to be a lot of changes for him to embrace. Possible suspension, right? I still think, and I said it earlier today, I still think that they may say, oh, time served in 2021 when he took the whole year off. Sweep it under the rug, lofty fine. I could see something like that happening. We've seen a lot less from, not equally bad situations. I don't want to put a number on this, but like from bad situations with like Tyreek Hill, where I thought was going to be like a,
career ending sometimes.
Correct. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, because he's a superstar, he's back on the field. And I think that same type of mentality, from a drafting standpoint needs to be had with Deshaun Watson, that the league does not like to suppress superstars, regardless of what happened on or off the streets. They want talent on the field. And as shitty as that sounds from like a human being standpoint, it is, the fact that the NFL, they look the other way with a superstar. And I could see them doing that, saying, hey, you know what? He took the whole year off in 2021. It was a full year suspension. He going to get hit with a fine. That's time served. And then they're, trade. Next thing you know, it's swept under the rug and he's in training camp somewhere. I think that's a realistic expectation that some people may have with him. Personally, though, I was listening to Drew today when he was going live. And he was saying that he thinks that there's going to be a suspension, but a minimal suspension because the criminal charges were dropped. And I could see that happening as well, where it's like a 2 to 4 game suspension. So a lot of different possibilities here, but just the uncertainty that is there, I think where it went from criminal to non-criminal charges was like an 8 to 12 game suspension down to like a 4 game suspension. And I think that's where he gets moved up in rankings, but I can't move him past, Joe Burrow at this point.
Yeah. And the funny thing about him and Burrow is like, Watson's still 26 years old. Like he's just over a year older than Burrow, which is crazy. Like knowing what Watson's already done in the league and already sat out a year. So I don't know. It's always crazy to me. I know Burrow's older, obviously had a longer tenure in college than most other people, but like if someone's going to trade for Watson, why not give it all? He still has so much.
Well, Watson wasn't the only quarterback to garner headlines this week. We'll move on to Carson Wentz, who was traded to Washington for 2 third-round picks and a second-round pick swap. Last year, Carson Wentz, even though he had the second-round pick swap was like 6 spots. Hashtag gross. Okay. Like that makes almost no difference. It was probably just a throw in. But as good as Wentz's touchdown to interception ratio was last year, that probably had to do with coaching rather than talent, because Wentz was 31st in accuracy rating, 22nd in yards per attempt, 29th in true completion percentage, 32nd in catchable pass rate. Like all of these are bottom of the barrel, worst starting quarterback in the NFL type of peripheral efficiency statistics. And he finished his quarterback 18 in fantasy points, despite having he threw 27 touchdowns, only had 7 interceptions. Outside of his MVP caliber 2017 year, cut short by the ACL, Wentz has never finished as a quarterback 1 fantasy points per game in any of the other seasons. Matthew Berry was kind of funny when he tweeted out, he was like, I'm getting inundated by haha, good luck, Washington fans, with Wentz. And I mean, he's probably going to be a back end quarterback too moving forward, but there's not, I don't see him as a significant upgrade from Taylor Heineke.
No, especially giving up 2/3. I mean, it doesn't look like a lot on paper, but 2/3 is fairly substantial. And what are you gaining at the end of the day? Brad, you kind of mentioned some of the metrics there. I'm on fantasy data right now, and you look at his pressured completion percentage. He was 37.7%, which makes him the 26th quarterback last year behind a really good O-line. So you assume he wasn't pressured too often. He had Jonathan Taylor in his back pocket. Now he goes to Washington, who doesn't by any means have a bad O-line, but if they lose Brandon Sheriff, I mean, it's already getting shaky there. So if he couldn't throw or under pressure with Jonathan Taylor and a good O-line, what's he going to do in Washington?
I moved him from like ranking 208 to like 196. That's how impactful this trade was to me. Like the only thing I liked about it was he gets a better receiving core, right? Yes, he loses Pittman, but he gets Scary Terry, F1, whatever you want to call him. Curtis Samuel will play the 3 games or 2 games that he's healthy. He's got Gibson, who's also, pretty dynamic back. There's just, a few more pieces in this offense that I think are going to allow him to push the ball down the field. So again, it's like I was tweaking at that point. Like it's not a giant jump or, moving somebody up or down far. So it's like this much.
Billy, Dom, we have breaking news on the podcast.
Do it. What is it?
Ian Rappaport just tweeted out that the Falcons have restructured the contract of Matt Ryan. That is not the Matt Ryan news we were hoping for. It means that Matt Ryan is going to stay with the Atlanta Falcons for the 2022 year. He's due $23.7 million in cash and had previously had a cap number of almost $50 million. So Matt Ryan's probably going to stay with Atlanta for 2022.
That was we always figured that was going to happen, right? Matt Ryan's the kind of guy where I feel like if they said we're going to trade you, he's like, no, I'm just going to retire. Like, I'm not going to leave, right? Like, he's getting to that age. He's actually younger than I thought. I thought he was going to be closer to 40, but I think he's like 36.
36, 37, yeah.
Yeah, but that deal is for them to go out and get him a wide receiver in free agency. Like, that's a team-friendly deal. They're going to be able to go out and compete, get somebody that they're going to need.
Well, and this is it's awkward though, because like the Falcons aren't in a position to be a juggernaut in the NFC, but they also could easily win the division. The Saints are terrible. The Bucks are like, okay, take a step back. They're not terrible, but they're in terrible positions. They're going to have to fill a lot more needs. The Falcons have a legit chance at winning the division, and keeping Matt Ryan like makes sense for the short term, but long term, like, I guess that they don't have a quarterback and they would keep one, but longer term,
as bad as people think though.
Like, have you seen like the assets that Seattle got in return for Russell Wilson? Even though many feel that the Seahawks were underpaid for Russell Wilson in some respects. Like, they got 2 firsts, they got 2 seconds, they got a starting first round tight end, they got a respectable D lineman, and they got a backup quarterback. Like,
that's debatable.
Okay, a third string quarterback, but like, you get a ridiculous amount of assets, and we don't know what the Saints are going to do. We don't know what the Bucks are going to do. Like, I don't think Bruce Arians is here to do a rebuild. I don't think that the Dennis Allen for the Saints is there for a rebuild. Like, I don't think that those teams want to rebuild. So why don't you just rebuild, get all of those assets for 2023 and get the pretty penny? Everyone knows how good Matt Ryan still is. He went to the Super Bowl a few years ago.
Yeah, like you said, that division has so many question marks. I mean, you even see the talented Buccaneers roster. How many of those guys are leaving? I mean, they're not going to be able to retain everybody, obviously. Ryan giving them that extra $12 million cap space says, hey, go get what we need, fill a couple holes, and let's do this thing. I mean, outside of maybe a Watson trade to Carolina, like we talked about earlier, there's not a whole lot going on in that division.
Yeah, see, I look at this and say that the Falcons are in a position to possibly, win this division. And I know that sounds ugly right now, but their defense was better than people think. Matt Ryan is still a very capable quarterback. When you look at the other quarterbacks in this division, you have no idea who it is on all 3 teams right now, right? You look at, they got Kyle Pitts last year. If they go out and get a couple pieces, this team is back in it. And they were only, a couple games removed from playoffs. So I think that it's the right move. I think the Falcons are going to be better this year. Especially, you got to think they lost their number 1 wide receiver in the middle of the year due to mental health. And so, I mean, that's a tough loss, especially when you designed your roster and your team around having him. So I think,
Billy, you and I were really high on Calvin Ridley. He was my wide receiver 1. I think he was like your wide receiver 4 or 5 or something like that.
He was my 1.
Yeah, right. We were both like all in on Calvin Ridley, and the Falcons before he left were a league average offense. Like, they were okay. When he left, they became arguably the worst offense in the NFL. I get it in the short term, like you can win in the playoffs, but what good is that if you don't have the roster to compete for the championship? Like, I think that there are just significantly better rostered teams. And I don't know. I think this is the opportunity that the Falcons could have taken. But, if you have an opportunity to win, this is a league that wants to win, except if you're the Dolphins.
Great. Next up, Russell Wilson.
Yeah, he was. We mentioned he was traded to Denver. along with a 4th round pick for Fant, Locke, Shelby Harris, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a 5th. But I think what's more interesting and what we should talk about is how it affects the peripheral players, because Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson. He's been a superstar his whole career. Even though he had a bad last year, 50% of his games last year, he finished as a top 10 quarterback in a weekly finish. That was the same as 2020. In 2019, it was only 44%. So he's still very good and throws some of the prettiest deep balls, really connects well with those deep players. So how is his presence on the Denver offense going to elevate the likes of Albert Okwuegbunam, Jerry Jeudy's, Cortland Sutton, and Tim Patrick? Look, I at least gave a good faith effort on the pronunciation of Albert's name. Okay.
Oh, I've already just taken defeat on the name and just say A-OK. Like I can't even say Tua's last name. It's like I'm not even going to try on Albert's.
I just looked up the pronunciation and I closed the tab. I'm not trying.
I still have questions.
I have more doubts actually now than I did before looking it up. So
a couple things it did for me was it definitely bumped up the pass catchers. Like looking at my rankings, I moved Cortland Sutton up almost 40 spots. Like I moved Jerry Jeudy from like 87th to like 47th. And so you just look at what Russell Wilson has done in the past with his receivers and being able to support, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who have put up 2 top 20 wide receiver seasons and has been, steady best ball, just, maniacs putting up boom, boom, boom weeps. And I see a very similar output for Cortland Sutton and for Jerry Jeudy. You have to think like how good of a season Cortland Sutton was having before tearing that ACL. And then he came back and was recouping and had some quarterback controversy. So you look at all of that it takes some time to rebuild that trust on the knee, especially in a receiver. And then you add in an elite quarterback and a team that wants to compete, who already has a pretty damn good defense. Broncos arrows pointing up and all these receiver pass catchers pointing up for me. Like I said, moved Jeudy up about 40 spots. He's now in my top 50. Cortland Sutton is now in my top. Let me find him again. Cortland Sutton is now in my top 80. And then I have Tim Patrick, who moved up into my top 150.
I wonder if I would even move Cortland Sutton above Jerry Jeudy in a half PPR setting, because Cortland Sutton is the big-bodied wide receiver who gets down the field. His average target distance was 2nd in the NFL last year. His you mentioned that he was slow coming back from the ACL, but despite that, he was wide receiver 8 in air yards. We talk about, like, very commonly on Twitter, we've seen like the DK Metcalf to Cortland Sutton comparisons. And while they're different players, there are definitely similar roles that they've played. And Sutton was getting the opportunity, a very similar opportunity that Metcalf was getting in that Seattle offense. So it would not surprise me if Sutton is the one who goes off and not just Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I lean on the side of Jeudy just because it's always usually an age thing for me. I might be a Cortland Sutton hater a little bit. I got Jeudy at wide receiver 27, Sutton at wide receiver 42. I just think Jeudy brings more to the table, and I think we have a lot more to see of Jeudy. It's not fair what he's really had to deal with quarterback-wise through the first couple of years. Looking at some of the advanced efficiency metrics from last year, I know Sutton had a shortened season, but target separation, Jeudy was far away and above both Patrick and Sutton, had less drops, has a higher true catch rate, just a more polished route runner, is able to do more. I think the new coaching staff will be able to use Jeudy a little bit better than what we see in the past with Vic Fangio, who was a defensive-minded guy. Like, all you have to do is get Jerry Jeudy in space. Coming out of college, people were talking about him as being the best route runner that they've ever seen. I mean, it's still there. You still kind of see that. So I would be very hard pressed to put Sutton ahead of Jeudy at any point in time throughout the offseason process.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Jeudy He was the wide receiver 1 in the NFL in target separation last year. He's able to get open. His route running, you mentioned,
2.44
was
Yeah.
spectacular. Despite his high ankle sprain at the beginning of the season, he still was wide receiver 37 in a hog rate and wide receiver 27 in yards per route run. He was, an absolute stud, despite those things, and despite how we know how badly high ankle sprains can affect wide receivers. Okay. We'll go to Seattle. We don't really have a quarterback, but what are the ranges of outcomes now for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf? We've kind of seen the ceiling, right, as like both being top 10, but maybe where's the floor for these two players depending upon what quarterback comes in?
I think they still will have respectable floors. I mean, it obviously depends on what they end up doing with Rashad Penny. I would be kind of surprised if they give the money that they gain by getting rid of Russ right back to Penny. I mean, it's not a good play to pay running backs in general. I mean, I don't care who the running back is.
Seattle, though.
It would be very Seattle. But even if they do bring him back, I mean, say they don't make a big play at quarterback and roll with Drew Lock. They're going to be throwing the ball. They're in a loaded division. They're going to be playing from behind. I think Lockett and Metcalf are still talented enough to be able to produce similar numbers to what we saw. I would still prefer Metcalf based off of the upside and what he can do after the catch. But yeah, it's all going to depend on if they do make a play for Watson, if we're stuck with Drew Lock. I mean, there's a lot of factors that play into it. That's why my rankings are based off of their floor almost, or what we've seen in the past. Obviously, you have to drop them a little bit because we don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think you move them too far.
Yeah, that's a tough answer right now. There's just so many wide, variety of options that could really happen. There's too much variance right now. I'm not gonna move them up or down too much right now, just because it could be Deshaun Watson, it could be Drew Lock, or so. Those are the kind of outcomes that are possible right now inside Seattle, and these receivers are just too talented to drop down too much. I think that they're going to elevate the quarterback play around them. I mean, look at last year what DK Metcalf did with, I don't even remember who was throwing the ball down the stretch. Like he was
Geno
still putting
Smith.
up. Yeah, that's not okay. Exactly. Thank you, Geno. He was still putting up wide receiver 1 numbers with Geno Smith, for crying out loud. Right. So like when you look at this receiving core and now you add in Fant, who is going to be able to take some of that pressure off the top, I think that it's going to open the field more. And, fantasy wise, you hope it's someone like Watson, but if it's not, they still have a lot of draft capital to invest inside of a young player here, and then maybe try to sign a veteran for cheap. So there's a lot of different options that they could go to, but I'm not going to move up or down my rankings too far. And if you're drafting right now, I just say, draft with an open mind and take the discount when it presents itself. Don't close yourself off from any of these players that you're drafting, because ADP is going to fluctuate. Like look at Deshaun Watson, who is going late in rounds and now is already up 2 or 3 rounds in drafts today. And so you look at these wide receivers like Tyler Lockett and with DK Metcalf, and if you start seeing them slip a round or two, like by all means capitalize on that value and get that return investment once some of the news breaks and they get a quarterback.
And the value is peaking right now. I mean, you're not going to probably get them at a less price than you are right now, because the assumption is probably Lock, unless people are sold on the whole Watson thing. I mean, they're gonna fall in some spots just because of the uncertainty.
Yep.
Right now, DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 14 going in the middle of the 5th round in the Best Ball Superflex underdog draft. And Tyler Lockett is wide receiver 26 going at the 82nd pick. So that would put him in the 8th round.
7th, 8th round.
The 7th, 8th round. So yeah, you're able to get those Seattle wide receivers at a pretty good discount. Let's move on to another set of quarterback news. Bradley's happy because the Packers were able to re-sign Aaron Rodgers and Devonte Adams. I was waiting for Billy to pull up some triumphant hallelujah music, but it's okay.
I was thinking of which one I want to use and I froze. Oh, this one. I was like, man, I don't know. I was looking at my soundboard. I'm like, which one do I want to use? And then I froze. I didn't know which one to use.
Poor Dom. Sorry. Aaron Rodgers is going to stick around for a while, 4 years, $200 million. Devonte Adams gets the franchise tag. It's goodness all around in Green Bay. Obviously, they're going to have to still cut some salary cap that's going to have to be negotiated. But somehow a $50 million per year deal is team friendly. I don't know. Make it make sense.
Yeah, we'll have to see more of what it ends up being. I just wanted him out of the division. Not the case. But, I mean, even last year I had the assumption like he's not going anywhere. I think a lot of people overthink the whole situation, and we're kind of right back where I expected outside of the whole retirement thing, which I think might have been real.
I think so too. Certainly Aaron Rodgers has become more communicative outwardly, but also that perception of inward reflection exists as well. And if he wanted to go out, he wanted to go out well. We saw like Peyton Manning, he went out with a Super Bowl, but then the following year, it was like atrocious, like forgettable. And we saw with Tom Brady this year, like still performing at a very high level, and then decided to call it quits. Aaron Rodgers, I think, would still want to finish as the elite, but I think there's still a lot of gas left in the tank. 2 back-to-back MVP seasons. I mean, there was some criticism of him being the highest paid player. He's been the best player in the NFL for the last 2 years. Of course, he deserves to be paid the most.
At least 2 years. I mean, you could argue deep into that. I mean, I'm sure you could, Bradley, but I have the same opinion on him.
I'll let you do the arguing for me, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's shown it for year after year, even without having the MVP seasons. It's just he deserves that contract, and I mean, everything up from here.
So it's interesting. He still has yet to sign the contract, right?
Right.
The deadline is by Wednesday. So if he doesn't sign by Wednesday, Bradley, you might have a different tune come next week. But
yeah, Billy at the ready if
it'll be this one instead. But we have the contract is supposed to relieve a lot of cap from this year, which would make it a team-friendly deal, right? The guaranteed money, signing bonuses, etc. They were already able to lock up Devonte Adams, which we all know, but the next steps are probably, to go after like somebody like Jair Alexander and focus on their defense. So I can see, depending upon what this contract, officially breaks down to, because he has yet to sign it, has yet to be released. But depending upon what it is, it may really help them in their cap hell predicament right now.
Okay, we'll keep moving through the news. We talked a little bit about Calvin Ridley, but it kind of stinks that he was suspended for all of 2022. I understand there's the integrity of the game aspect, and I think two things can both be true at the same time. Like you want to preserve the integrity of the game and knowing that the players are not disrupting that, but at the same time having an understanding that this was a player who was already like away from the team, understanding these circumstances, understanding that he was not influencing the game. It came out like there was evidence or there was no evidence that he was influencing the games. And so I don't know. It's a tough spot to be in. Like I sympathize with him as a human being. Like you want to support him. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, this was not the right thing to do. So
forget that. He knows the rules. He broke the rules, and it's black and white. You don't want to open up that Pandora's box. It's going to just create, one thing after the other. I understand the flip side of the coin, though, and people are saying that the owners are profiting off NFL betting, and the players should be able to partake in that as well, whether it's betting themselves or not. But the rules are the rules. You open up that Pandora's box, and it's going to be very, very, very messy. So they had to make an example out of him. That's what it was. It broke down to drawing a line in the sand and saying, if you do, these are the consequences. And, you have to give it to the NFL for sticking to that, because at what point then does it become okay for one player, and then next thing you know, these rules are like Goodell suspensions, and you just never know what's going to happen. So keep it black and white and make it simple.
And it's just going to become more accessible to players on different teams as it grows state by state, the whole sports betting thing. I mean, it was strictly Vegas for how many years, and now it seems like a different sports book is opening up in a state every other month. So $1 or $1,500, you just can't do it.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, because you see the increase in popularity, but also like it's evidenced. Like it's very clear that they were able to ping it off a cell phone. Like they have physical evidence of that. And that's, I think the frustrating thing is that in the NFL, when there are these alleged other issues, like we've seen domestic violence being handled in certain ways and players being suspended for 4 games or 6 games. But I think it has to do with the evidence. Like it wasn't until Ray Rice got suspended for however long. I think it was initially only 2 games until the video came out, right? Until there was actual evidence, video evidence. So, if you're gonna do things, don't get caught, I suppose. But but yeah, I think that this was definitely a lesson taught by the NFL to the rest of the players. And Ridley, and from a dynasty perspective, he loses a year of play, right? He's also he would have been a year and a half removed by the time he comes back in 2023. And Lord knows what the Atlanta Falcons are going to look like. He's also lost out on a lot of money because by this time he would be like negotiating his second contract. And we don't know what that's going to look like for him moving forward.
I'm more interested to see how the Falcons move forward with their wide receiver situation, because on paper it's not pretty at all. I mean, if it stays this way, which I wouldn't imagine it does.
Oh, you aren't inspired by Chad Hansen and Olamide Zaccheaus?
I mean, they're electrifying wide receivers, but no. I'm not. And maybe they have a plan with the whole Matt Ryan restructure we just talked about a little bit ago. Maybe they have a plan. Maybe they have a couple of guys on their list. Obviously, I would imagine they signed somebody, even if they overpay, which a lot of the times you're going to overpay for a wide receiver in free agency. I think your best way to build always, if you're in this spot, is the draft, but maybe not the spot that the Falcons are in, because they need like immediate impact players who have done it before. It's just a bad depth chart.
I wonder if an Allen Robinson or Amari Cooper might be an interesting.
Allen Robinson would be a fantastic fit.
Okay, let's keep moving. Jack Doyle retired. There's an open tight end position in Indy. Mo Alley Cox.
Granson.
I know Billy's on the Granson train. Mo Alley Cox is a free agent. We'll see if he resigns.
All aboard!
But we got the Granson train.
It was such a wasted 20-round pick last year, but I'm going to do it again.
Well, Granson was a 4th-round pick out of SMU. Above average 40-yard dash, not great speed scoring, great burst score, great agility, good catch radius. Like this was a player who had good measurables, but he was used a lot out of the slot.
That's
when he
why
was
I
in
love
college.
70% of his routes.
He was running a lot of his, and so he's a pass catcher. And the Colts, like T.Y. Hilton's a free agent, Zach Pascal is a free agent. You've got a lot of opportunity in this Indianapolis Colts offense, and now some questions of who's going to be quarterback there for Indy now that Carson Wentz is traded. Is it Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it going to be someone else?
It's clearly going to be Kirk Cousins.
Says the Vikings fan. As a Vikings fan, do you really want Kirk Cousins to go?
No.
I'm in the middle. I mean, Vikings Twitter right now is 100% one way or the other.
Do you want Mitchell Trubisky or do you want Kirk Cousins?
Well, Kellen Mond, clearly. But no, I mean, new GM, new head coach. I tweeted this earlier this week. It's hard for me to imagine that a 36-year-old head coach and a first-time GM who's just scraping the surface in the NFL would walk in and trade Kirk Cousins. I kind of mentioned like the whole job security thing. Kirk's going to get you a near 500 record just regardless. He's safe. He's a safe option. He has 1 year left on his contract. There's no reason to move forward. He trends on Twitter like every other day for absolutely no reason.
I think there was one of the teams, the Panthers or the
Panthers.
The Panthers reached out and did not get Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. I did tweet earlier though, if he were to go anywhere, I think the Colts would be a fantastic fit. All he needs is some time, a run defense, a running back and a top 10 defense. It's a perfect storm for him. I just don't see it happening.
Somebody give Sammy a trophy here. I love you. Yes, Paris Campbell would do something finally if he's able to stay healthy with Kirk Cousins. I agree.
Yes. Kirk Cousins would be a significant quarterback upgrade over. Kirk Cousins is going as the quarterback 14 behind Justin Fields, but in front of Trevor Lawrence, Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill, and I think that's the right spot.
Yeah.
What does it mean for Justin Jefferson? They have a connection, obviously, right? Justin Jefferson has surprised people his rookie year, continued it his sophomore year. Do you want to break up that connection if you are a franchise owner and seeing the success that your young star wide receiver has had with this quarterback?
No, because I don't even think they've really scratched the surface. That's been a run-heavy team under Zimmer the last 2 years, and that's clear. And we were able to see what O'Connell was able to do with Cooper Kupp. I know O'Connell didn't call all the plays. It was the majority of McVay, but just what they were able to scheme up for Cooper Kupp to break out like that. You could argue Jefferson's as talented, if not more talented. It depends who you're talking to, obviously. I'm not going to down Cooper Kupp after that season, but what Cooper Kupp showed us early, you could definitely make the argument. So if he can do that with Kirk, who has, like you said, had chemistry with him, I don't know what the ceiling is there.
All right, we'll keep moving on. We had a flurry of tight ends that were franchise tagged. So we'll hit on those. David Njoku, Dalton Schultz, Mike Gasicki. David Njoku, that was kind of a surprise tag given his minimal usage last season. In Baker Mayfield's rookie year, David Njoku was a tight end 1. And then his role continued to get reduced. Stefanski was using 2 tight end sets, and they brought in Austin Hooper on the record-setting tight end deal. But Njoku, a former first-round pick, he's got the talent. His player profiler comp is Travis Kelce. And he's got the speed, he's got the size. And I don't think you bring back a player like this just for his blocking. And in fact, David Njoku wasn't that good of a blocker. So I wonder if it's going to be a changing of the guard that Austin Hooper, they're probably not going to move on from Austin Hooper. That's the rumblings right now. But Hooper may be relegated to a rotational tight end that can block, and Njoku maybe the more dynamic down the field tight end.
And I just don't understand the whole tag thing with tight ends like this. And I think Njoku was the most surprising one. He's not getting nearly $11 million for 2022. I don't know what their plan is. It's the same coaching staff. Their tight end room is so crowded. They still have Harrison Bryant. Like you said, Austin Hooper still getting all that money. Yeah. Why invest so much in the tight end position if you're not going to feature them all that much?
Harrison Bryant, the Mackey Award winner, from college, tight end of the year. I agree with you. It doesn't make sense unless the plan is not to go hog wild in free agency for wide receivers and instead to use Njoku as a receiving option, because we saw at the end of the year, the Browns were really struggling to get the ball to anybody. They were looking at Anthony Schwartz. Donovan Peoples-Jones had hands of bricks. Nobody could catch. Rashad Higgins is a free agent this year. So there are a lot of pass catcher questions. And I think Njoku changing roles is going to be pretty significant. I wish he had gone to the Chargers, but hopefully the Browns will still be a bastion of fancy goodness.
Yeah, you look at sorry, you look at personnel success, and they only ran 12 personnel 49% of the time, which was, bottom half of the league. So if they are going to utilize Njoku while eating the Hooper contract, which is apparently what they're doing, they're going to have to run 12 personnel more. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that affects the dynamic of this offense. You hear them talking about not re-signing Laundry, possibly cutting.
And they're not re-signing Janovich, their fullback.
Yeah, so that would mean that that signifies to me a lot of 12 personnel here in 2023, which is going to help the running game as well. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can analyze this and take a look at it. But I expect to see a lot of Njoku on the field, as well as whether it's Hooper or Bryant, but expect to see 12 personnel more than 49% of the time here in 2022.
It's just hard to push either of those two up your rankings, like feeling comfortable knowing that they're both on the field, because A, you don't get all the snaps, and B, you don't get all the targets. I mean, it's going to be a split. Like we saw Njoku go off the 1 week for 150 yards against the Chargers with a touchdown, and it was just came out of nowhere. Like, he can do it, but he just doesn't have the opportunity all that much. And I don't think it's going to come this year, regardless of what he's getting paid.
So looking at let's look at snap counts, right? Or let's look at target shares. I want to pull it up as we're talking about it, because this is actually a good question. So because they're such good values in drafts right now, like Hooper's going undrafted. You have David Njoku, who has now fallen in drafts because he is re-signing with Cleveland. He was going in like rounds 14 pre-Superflex drafts, right? Now he's sliding into like 17, 18 again. So I just want to real quick pull up Cleveland so we can talk about this. I was not prepared for this. But you have Austin Hooper, who had a 10% target share last year. Peoples-Jones, who had a 15%, and that was a lot of it was injury-based. Njoku had 8%, right? So looking at available targets, right? What if Hunt disappears? What if he is let go, cap casualty, which is you're hearing of the possibility of it happening.
Well, because Ernest Johnson was extended an original round tender, and Kareem Hunt has a 0 dead cap if he's cut.
Correct. So you add in that. What happens if Laundry is now part of this equation? You're talking about 30% target share that's going to be available for this team plus. And I mean, that opens up a lot of vacated targets for somebody like Njoku, who is actually a pretty damn dynamic tight end who just happens to be in a really bad situation time and time again. So I have loved the talent. I have been, I joked around with Bradley a few weeks ago off air and said, he is my Corey Davis. And, it's just one of those players where I was too stupid to quit, and I've held in Dynasty for years. And Njoku was just that talented. And I would have liked to see him on a different team. It didn't happen. Like, I was hoping he was going to the Chargers. I was hoping maybe he would go to, any team necessarily that can throw the ball that needs a tight end. And it didn't happen. But that being said, the ball seems to be moving, and there seems to be a lot of different possibilities and ways for him to gain some extra target share here in this offense, and especially if they run 12 personnel. So it's definitely a situation to monitor. If we see some more of these pass catchers or other, positional skill players get cut or released or traded, then I think that the arrow points up for Njoku. But in the meantime, hold in Dynasty.
I will keep drafting him in the 16th and 17th.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Best ball drafts, though.
Yeah, it's best ball. Exactly. It's like he's going to have those boom weeks. And when he does, it's great because you spent nothing on him. But, if you're drafting him as your tight end 1, there's a problem. But when he's your third tight end or even your second tight end, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, second's fine too. Like I said, you're getting $11 million for 1 year. They're not just tagging someone to tag someone.
No,
like,
they're
it's
going to
not forced upon a team. They're right. You would assume that they're going to utilize him in a way that we haven't seen before.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll move on to Dalton Schultz, who is also franchise tagged by the Dallas Cowboys. Schultz, though, is coming off a career year. We thought his career year was last year when he took over for Blake Jarwin, but instead Schultz elevated his game this year. Granted, there were injuries. CeeDee Lamb had a high ankle sprain. Gallup had his injuries. Amari Cooper was out with injuries plus COVID stints. So there was opportunity for Schultz, but Gallup is probably not going to be back from his ACL right away. Amari Cooper is generating trade interest or maybe cut due to the $20 million cap hit. And Schultz last year had a 16+ 80+% target share. He was on the field, 82% snap share. This is a player who ran the 5th most tight end routes in the NFL, and he caught touchdowns. He was involved. Dak Prescott trusts him, and it seems as though the Dallas Cowboys are investing significantly in Dalton Schultz. So good on him getting the bag.
Yeah, I love this signing. I mean, he's been very productive the last couple of years here in this offense, and subtract out all those targets from, Amari Cooper and potentially, we expect
maybe
Wilson
Cedric Wilson. We don't
Yep.
know if Cedric Wilson, because he played very well last year in stints. And if a team throws $7-8 million at Cedric Wilson, boom, there goes,
Yeah, and I think exactly. I was looking at that, and then you hear word of Gallup re-signing now. So I still like Dalton Schultz. I've been drafting him more since the news of Gallup re-signing, because if that does happen, you would maybe expect them to let Wilson walk, which I didn't expect a few weeks ago, right? But I'm starting to believe it's more of an option now after they franchise tag Schultz and the news of Gallup re-signing, because then that means they probably address the position in the draft, get someone young, get someone on the team, and then from there, Dalton Schultz is now the second option in the passing game as Gallup recovers from that ACL injury. So I've been moving Schultz up my board, and I will continue to do so as this situation kind of unfolds. But with the clarity that we have now, Schultz is the number 2 option on this team, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Bradley, you talked about the 16% target share. If you would have told me before the year that he would be second on the Cowboys offense with CeeDee Lamb, with Amari Cooper, with Michael Gallup, I mean, obviously pending injury, whatever, but the second option, the second highest target share in an offense with that many weapons, just shows that they're willing and committed to get him the ball.
Heck, I would take Dalton Schultz right now. He's tight end 8 in ADP right now on Underdog, and he's at ADP 90.6, which is a round and a half later than TJ Hawkinson. Give me Dalton Schultz over TJ Hawkinson for 2022. Sorry, Billy. But
I'm over TJ Hawkinson now. It's a new year, Bradley. It's a new me.
Fair enough. Okay, let's keep moving. Mike Gasicki was franchise tagged.
I love this move.
For the Hunter Long hype train. It just got snuffed out real quick. Gasicki plays mostly out of the slot. Our friend of the podcast, Josh Larkey, has some very popular TikToks about Mike Gasicki. So wanted to give a shout out to Josh, but nevertheless, Gasicki, he's boom or bust, I think. And that's been our experiences of him. Like, he'll get the ball down the field, but we don't know how good of a quarterback Tua Tagovailoa actually is to be able to do that consistently. Like, Jalen Waddle is short passes, Tua can get him there, but I don't think Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki can be consistent options. They're more best ball targets than season-long targets, in my opinion.
Dom?
Yeah, I like the Gasecki move a lot. Another guy like Schultz. I mean, the Gasecki and Schultz moves made sense to me more than the Njoku did, just because we've seen it from them before. Gasecki's still fairly young, just over 26 years old. Last year, he ranked second in cushion, one of the 2 tight ends that was over 4 and had a true catch rate of 100%. Looking at fantasy data's advanced efficiency metrics, so I like Gasecki. I'm glad he's back. Just over 18% target share. I don't think it's really going anywhere based off of the options that they currently have. So I'm all in. I love it.
First half of the season, Mike Gesicki was tight end 4 in the season. He had 81.5 half PPR points.
And then what happened?
And that I'm getting there. Let the story unfold, right? Then he ended up going the second half of the season is where he fell off. He was tight end 18, but we saw the emergence of
Jalen
Waddle, right? And so I definitely think that the Waddle presence and the targets that he commands in this offense is undeniable. But new offense, new system, new coach. This coach just came from a very tight end friendly offense from the 49ers. being able to utilize somebody in the same capacity as George Kittle, right?
Oh, I was
And
waiting for the Kittle Gasicki comparison. Oh boy.
yes, and then you're going to be able to utilize Waddle in the same capacity as Debo. I could see those similarities being utilized here again for Miami because they're both very similar in terms of skill set. And I think that, Jaceki is going to have a better year than people think because they're drafting him on his ADP based upon his second half year performance when he was tight end 18. People forget about how good he was in the beginning of the year. You marry those two together, and he's still a top 10 tight end. Bradley, got a smirk. Do it. Say it, Bradley.
I don't know about that. So Jalen Waddle's the new Debo Samuel. That's what we're saying.
Yes, with more targets.
First, Chris Godwin was franchise tagged. He tore his ACL late in the season. I think that's a red flag for drafting him in best ball leagues. Like if you want to, in season-long leagues, take shots at him, like fine. You're not going to get stuff from him, but he's been an avoid for me because even if he progresses well, we saw Odell Beckham Jr. tear his ACL and then hurry back, and he came back too quickly, and then there became this dysfunction because he didn't get the off-season workout with Baker Mayfield instead he was rehabbing, and then he missed some games, and then they're in the middle of the season, and then there becomes this dysfunction. At least Godwin is only on a 1-year deal, but Odell Beckham, I see a similar wide receiver comp there that I'm concerned about banking on Chris Godwin as a wide receiver 2 in my best ball leagues because right now he's going where is Godwin?
It's probably going in the 60 range. I'm assuming. Oh, not with Superflex. It's probably going around 8 with Superflex.
Why am I not finding him here? Godwin. He's going ADP 89, which is actually better than what I thought, but still, like if you're going 0 wide receiver in these types of drafts, which Billy and I have done from time to time, it's not. He's not a wide receiver 2 I'd want to take a shot on. Like maybe a wide receiver 3, but I don't want him banking on him in my starting lineup.
Yeah, I'm the same. I love the talent, love the fact that he's re-signing with a team he's already familiar with. He's gonna be side by side with Evans, but the late injury has me scared as well. Will he outperform at second half? Absolutely, but first half it could be troublesome.
Yeah, another team with so many questions at the quarterback position, at offense. I mean, the whole roster in general is just up in the air. So as we get closer, I'll feel a little bit more comfortable with the ranking. But right now, it's a stay away spot for sure.
All right, we'll keep moving. Wide receiver position, Mike Williams signed a 3-year, $60 million deal. Poof! There goes Josh Palmer. He garnered some targets, and I think will be regularly rotated. Jalen Guyton probably won't be re-signed, and there are some other wide receivers as well whose target shares may be sucked into Josh Palmer. But Mike Williams is there to stay for a while. So good on the Chargers. Bring back Mike Williams.
Yep, I love it. You want to keep your young quarterback happy, keep the team familiar. A lot of success last year in this new Lombardi system. So I like the signing for him. I like the signing for the team overall, and another target of mine in many drafts.
And early in the year, we saw him. He was like a top 5 wide receiver through almost 6-7 weeks. So it's like, I mean, you see the potential. They obviously drafted him at a high spot. So I always like retaining your guys first rather than letting your guys walk and then bringing someone else in, because how many free agents do we see just get the bag and then get cut like 2 years into their deal? It's just not worth it. Like, keep your guy in the building. He's got obviously a good relationship with everyone there. He's been with Keenan. He's been with Herbert. Keep him there. I mean, it's a respectable contract for what he's shown.
So weeks 1 through 5, Mike Williams was the wide receiver number 1 ahead of Cooper Kupp. That's how good of
he
a
was good. He was good.
that was half PPR. So full PPR, Cooper Kupp had him, but half point PPR, Mike Williams was the number 1 wide receiver weeks 1 through 5. Through the first half of the season, weeks 1 through 8, he dipped down to wide receiver 12, but still, a great start. And I think he got hurt in that time span, didn't he?
Yeah, he came down funny, and also the type of targets he had changed about mid-season as well. Like they went back to using him as more of a deep threat. That's how he was used earlier in his career. I wonder if they will see that type of success and move him back into the slot a little bit more.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, he saw 10 or more targets in that 5-game stretch you were talking about, Billy. In that weeks 1 through 5, he saw 10 plus targets 3 times. Didn't see it again the rest of the year. No. Outside of week 18, if you want to throw that in there, the game that they should have tied the Raiders, but.
Ooh. We'll finish up here with a couple restructures of wide receivers and give a couple takes. Michael Thomas was expected to be moved this offseason. However, the Saints did restructure his contract. He's not expected to move. This was a big get for the Saints, at least in keeping someone who is historically had a 25 to 30% target share. There are a lot of questions about, is he healthy? Is he mentally there? But at least we know he's got talent, and that's something that the Saints were desperately in need of last year. They were throwing to Deontay Hardy and Marquez Callaway. It was really ugly.
I kind of like Callaway. He's such a cheap target.
So were you the one who was drafting Callaway in the first and second rounds of best ball drafts last year, Billy?
No. I'm getting him in round 19, 20 this year. But it's, I like the value that he presents himself this year with having someone like Michael Thomas back to take away, the pressure off the field. That's why I like him. I just feel like it's a value in drafts. I don't necessarily like the player, just the value in drafts right now. That's how I determine who I like, is what is the value? How is it going to return? How am I going to get ROI in my investments in fantasy football? And Callaway's a good value right now because of the upside that he presents himself on a week-to-week basis playing, opposite of Michael Thomas. So I'll take it. But I don't know, man. Michael Thomas, I've been adding shares of him just because you have to have, some in your portfolio. You have to balance it out to some degree, but I'm just not sold. The diva-ness in him not playing, I question his drive. And when you have to question a player's drive and motivation to stay on the field, it's never a good thing. You look at it and he quits on his team that easy. It's hard for me to invest a lot of money in a player at that point in drafts when I see what he has done to his team for the last 2 years and just kind of up on him and leave and say, I'm not playing, pretty much is what he did. And
yeah, the biggest thing for me was the late surgery, how long he pushed that off to be like.
That's what I'm saying.
And not communicating about it. That was the other issue, was not only how late it was, but that he didn't tell anybody on the staff that, this is what's going on or anything like that.
And a lot of that might have been Sean Payton related, and we don't know the scenario, but all I'm saying is that when a player starts doing that kind of crap, you put it in the bank, back of the head, don't forget it. When you come up on draft picks, use it as maybe a ultimate or a deciding factor between two players and say, hey, you know what? He's done this before. He could do it. Definitely do it again.
Antonio Brown season. Okay. Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard restructured his contract. He's coming off an Achilles injury, I believe, late season Achilles injury. He will remain with the Giants. And this is a good faith move for the Giants towards Sterling Shepard. Shep may not play much next year. We'll see. If he doesn't play, wheels up for Kadarius Toney, because we saw when Toney was out there and Shepard was not. Toney played primarily out of the slot in those cases, and he dominated. He was commanding targets, which was a concern coming out of the draft, that he was more shifty and a gadgety type of player and just quick. And so Shepard being a locker room presence will be important in coming back, but as long as he's not out there, it's Kadarius Toney season.
And you also
I think Shep is in a good spot. I mean, he showed his presence early, right away last season when he was healthy. Daniel Jones had a type of trust in him to get him the ball, and Shepard showed kind of what we've been looking for since he's been drafted. But I think he took this deal just because he knows the money's not out there if he were to leave, I don't think. Being loyal to the Giants, understanding his role, I think he's in a good spot. Like you said, Bradley, Kadarius Toney, when he was fully healthy, he showed a type of electricity I haven't seen since like Percy Harvin almost. I mean, some of those moves that he had in their win at New Orleans, that comes to mind specifically, like just stopping on a dime and defenders flying past him. Like that type of energy that he showed, Kadarius Toney can just go off, I think. And it's not a bad thing to have Shepard rotating in and out.
So not just that, but you also have Evan Ingram, who's unrestricted free agent. So between the two of them, you have 126 vacated targets. So a lot of targets to go around for.
Ingram maybe going to the Buffalo Bills is the rumor right now.
Oh man, that'd be fantastic for both of the teams.
Well, Christian Kirk also double dating with Josh Allen, so we'll see who fills in that spot.
Let me throw this to you guys: if Evan Ingram signs with the Bills, where do you rank him?
Top 5.
Evan Ingram? No, Dawson Knox is still there.
Yeah, I'd still go top 5.
I said 7.
Dawson Knox is the red zone target. He's not going to be utilized.
I would fade Ingram. Still, I would not put him in my top 10.
Haven't used that one in a while.
He was waiting.
You know me though. I'm an Evan Ingram stan, and I love Evan Ingram, and I just don't think the Giants have been a good fit for him. I mean, yes, he had some drop issues, the last year and a half, but I still think that
his whole career.
I still think though that like a team that's going to utilize his talents, Buffalo will be able to utilize him and get the most out of him. He'll be a great tight end between the 20s, be able to utilize different packages. This team also has a lot of targets available too. So I think it's a great fit. I'd love to see it happen.
And I don't want to comp the two by any means, but it almost has a feel of like when Ebron left the Lions and had the Pro Bowl season with Indy, just getting out of a certain system because Ebron had issues with drops and then turned in a Pro Bowl year where he scored 14, 13 touchdowns that season. It kind of has that feel to me, honestly.
I mean, Ingram going into 2021, he was a buy for me because prior to 2021, 3 of his 4 seasons, he had at least a 20% target share in the Giants offense. And for a tight end, that's phenomenal, regardless of your drop rate. But this past year, he struggled with a lot of things and hit a career low in target share. But also, if we looked at what the Giants had, they had so many pieces. It was kind of like the Denver Broncos, where they didn't have like elite pieces at all, but they had they had Toney and they had Shepard and they had Darius Slayton, they had Kenny Golladay, they have Evan Ingram and Saquon Barkley, and somehow Devontae Booker ran for the same amount of rushing yards as Saquon Barkley this year. Like all like useful pieces, but not elite production from anyone. And I think that did eat into Evan Ingram last year. So
you got to love his ADP right now, though. Like,
I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all.
Yeah, his ADP right now is just astronomical. Like it's like 15, 16 rounds, 15, 16. If that lands with the Bills, the amount of climb that you're going to see and the teams that you're able to build with that late of investment at the position, it's going to pay dividends. I mean, I like always taking a look at exposure rates, right? When you're talking about players and I'm always looking for discounts, right? Evan Ingram I own 49% inside the Superflex best ball right now. That's a little high for my liking. 31% inside the big board non-Superflex. But when you see those type of discounts where there's unknowns of players or people have recent biases against those players. Said it before, said again. Remove those biases, remove those feelings that you have for those players and look at opportunity and look at what that player can bring to the table. Draft for ceiling as well, right? And if he signs with the Bills, Dom says too, top 7. I say top 5, right?
That would be good for my best ball because he's my 4th most rostered tight
and Bradley
end.
Doesn't even like him.
I don't even like him, but I recognize he's a discount. Like I don't think he is that type. I mean, maybe, but
so you attack the discount.
Yeah.
Utilize the draft board to your advantage and make sure that you are able to capitalize on that. That's how you're going to get paid in these tournaments.
Boom. All right. Any other things that we need to chat about before we
Darrington
close it up?
Evans have to.
Okay. I tried to get off the podcast without talking about Darrington Evans, but here we are.
My dear sweet prince, Darrington Evans.
Signed with the Chicago Bears, claimed off of waivers from Tennessee with an injury designation, just has been hit by the knee injuries, but he's been like, he came out of Appalachian State in 2020 and had a 95th percentile 4-yard dash, 86th percentile speed score, a player who could burst as well, drafted in the 3rd round. Like, it's a shame that he didn't hit. You know,
yeah, he has the athletic profile. He really does.
Sure.
Like I'm hoping if it's like a similar like trajectory of like a Jerick McKinnon, right? That where he's able to kind of overcome these knee injuries and finally get on the field because he has the ability to catch and rush. I think the kid, if he can stay healthy, that's the kicker, right? Has to stay healthy. I think he could, be productive here in this Chicago offense. So, I am
there may be
excited about it.
opportunity, new coach, new David
Cohen's
Montgomery. There are questions. Yeah, Tariq Cohen is gone. Damian Williams is old and crusty.
Yeah, I
I
cannot
called
wait.
him old and crusty. He's 29 years old, and I'm older than
He
him.
has that
so
feel.
it doesn't feel good.
I cannot wait to overdraft Darrington Evans again 2 years in a row. I just can't help it. I'm gonna do
His
it.
rookie year, I had a lot of exposure to him just because he was like the clear backup to Derrick Henry, and I mean that's 16 career carries. Hasn't really went as planned, but like you said, he had all of the projections out of college to be that type of guy to have a role in an offense. Like his rookie year, I fully expected him to have a role with or without Henry in there.
Yeah, we expected it last year too. I mean, I owned, what was it, like 49%? I was showing Bradley at the beginning of week 1 in drafts, 200 drafts.
Billy was like, we were at a bar before the FF Expo, and it was in Cleveland.
He broke that, and he got that hammy on that run.
I took him to the Winking Lizard in Cleveland, Ohio, which has since shut down, Billy. We closed it.
Really?
So yeah, I know. What a shame. We'll have to find something else. Nevertheless, Billy was like showing me on his phone. He's like, Bradley, I have to show you. I have 49% Darrington Evans. And then about a half hour later, I get the notification on my phone. Billy, look, your 49% is dead because he left the preseason game with a knee sprain.
It was late round investments, 18, 19. But it was the right
process. It was the right process because Donta Foreman was fire. For the Tennessee Titans, Dontrell Hilliard was a useful piece.
Every single time I saw one touch the ball, all I could think about was my dear sweet prince not getting the ball, and it just killed me.
Adrian Peterson too, just ripping off 10 yards a carry, basically.
Yeah,
every time.
Darrington Evans would average 50 yards a touch. Like it's settled right now.
Hey, you can't argue against it. We haven't been able to see it.
Nope. Dom actually hit on a sore spot right there because Billy and I had a bet going during the season of whether or not Adrian Peterson would get 4 yards a carry. Wasn't it 4 yards a carry? 4 yards a carry.
I think you said 4 and I said under. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said under, and I said, well, okay, but he needs like 70 carries or 75 carries or something, and he didn't get to it, so I got bailed out. But
what was he at? He had to have been sub 2, right?
It was like 2.8 or something like that.
Let me pull it up.
I'm pulling it up because I don't even think it was 2.8. I watch AP like a hawk, and I don't think.
I don't know if he was moving like a hawk. We're right there. Why is it not loading? Come on. Adrian Peterson in 2021, 2.6.
That was close.
Yikes!
Almost half of the 4. It's a good spread.
Yeah, I should be able to double his carries and still just you get like a little just like a 1 yard average more.
That's you double his carries though. I mean, you got to put in a couple 90-yarders that he would have ripped off, so it would have leveled out.
It was a bad call.
Alrighty, everyone. Well, that is it. Dom, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell everybody where to find you?
You can find me at DomCinto_11. Golf content, football content throughout the off season. Hopefully the Vikings make some type of move so I can start talking about something. But you can find me there. And thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Always a pleasure. And for those tuning in, Bradley and I'll be back next week. So stay tuned and we'll keep you updated on Twitter. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.